Welcome to this week's episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. On this week's episode, we look into the last chance for Gaza, the new American 21-point plan for Gaza. Let's get started. The siege on Gaza City is in full force. We are seeing the IDF officially taking over Gaza City, which is the last stronghold of Hamas. It's only a matter of time at this point before the entire Gaza area is completely taken over and in control by the IDF. And as we've seen in many cases before this, whenever Hamas has their back up against the wall, we start hearing about deals, ways that they can save themselves, even for a brief moment. But this time is a little bit different, because meanwhile, as they are physically losing on the battlefield in Gaza, you have the entire world getting together at the United Nations to support the Palestinian cause. We've seen all of these Western liberal countries decide that they're going to recognize Palestine, which in itself means literally nothing. But it's a sign to the Hamas members that this worked, that the longer they hold out, the more they get. If you think about the start of this war, they essentially just wanted to end the war. That was it. Now you see the more dead bodies that they create, either fictionally or by putting them as human shields, the more they're getting. Now we're talking statehood. So there really has never been a reason for them to make a deal, other than when their back is against the wall. And considering the fact that the United Nations declaration of a genocide and a famine hasn't stopped Israel, despite the world pressure that those fake things caused, Israel is not stopping. And Hamas is on its way out. And they definitely know it. So the question is, as Hamas is about to be destroyed, at least the ones who are in Gaza, the ones in Qatar are probably pretty safe, for now, and are more than willing to give up every last person in Gaza for their cause, to stay in power. In a recent interview on CNN, one of the leaders of Hamas in Qatar said that every death is worth it. Every death gets them one step closer to their goal. If you want to see this clip, you can go onto our Instagram at jdr.podcast and take a look. So it doesn't seem like they really want to surrender. They are more than happy to let their people suffer because, in the end, it gets them what they want. And who really cares about the people of Gaza? On the other hand, we had a very big drastic change in the last little while, which we talked about on this podcast. The Arab world, who has had enough of this fight, some because they care about the people of Gaza, others because it gets in the way of their business with Israel. People like Saudi Arabia who are desperately trying to make peace with Israel, but can't until this war is over. These Arab countries have come out officially and said that Hamas is done and that they need to leave and that the Gaza area will no longer be run by Hamas. In addition, we have the President of the United States, Donald Trump, who has somewhat tried desperately to end this conflict, either for good intentions, wanting this war to be over and no more bloodshed, which is noble, or because he wants to say he solved another conflict in the world, which I guess is a means to an end, so if that's why, who cares? So, in somewhat of a bold step, which he does deserve credit for, he got the Arab world and himself in a room in order to finally come up with a plan that will work for everybody, which is a great idea because the Arab world does play a role. We need their support, either financially or otherwise, in order to finally put an end to this 2-year conflict and possibly the conflict about Hamas forever. In this meeting, Donald Trump has announced that he has a new plan for Gaza, a 21-point plan that we're going to go through one by one in order to decide if this is a good plan or not so good. And we'll even talk about the fact that who knows if this is even going to happen, because Hamas themselves has essentially said they're never giving up power. They're never going to surrender. So maybe this is all for nothing. So what's the difference? The first point of this 21-point plan is that Gaza will be de-radicalized, terror-free, and will not pose a threat to its neighbors, which is a great idea. We obviously don't have any details necessarily on how this is going to be done. In the past, they've talked about having an Arab government of some kind come in, UAE or the Saudis, and police the area to make sure there's no terror. This seems like a great idea, but let's be honest here, there's a lot of places in the world that are supposed to be quote-unquote terror-free, which unfortunately are not that much. It's kind of difficult to deal with the radical Islamic terrorism, no matter who's in charge of trying to get rid of it. Many of these Arab countries themselves deal with this kind of Islamic terrorism in their own countries. So we're going to expect them to solve the problem in Gaza? And what would be a very interesting turning point is if this does happen and the Arabs in Gaza, the ones from Saudi or UAE, and they start killing Gazans in Gaza in order to maintain safety and security in a terror-free zone. I wonder how that's going to go with the international community. Let's be honest, they don't care when they kill them in their own countries. Are they going to say anything for the Gazans when it's not Jews trying to deal with the terrorism? That would be interesting. So this point seems like it's a great idea. It might be a little challenging to deal with because who knows if it's even possible to get rid of every last person who believes in Hamas. We know that the numbers of Palestinian Arabs in Gaza and even the West Bank that support Hamas and their actions is pretty high. So not quite sure how you get rid of that other than through re-education, which we've talked about on the podcast before. So maybe it's possible. Maybe over the next generation or two, you start re-educating people and actually put that plan into action. The second point in this plan is that Gaza will be redeveloped for the benefit of its people. Which, sure, that's great. I mean, either way, whether it's Israel or the Arab world, someone's going to have to rebuild it. So I guess the fact that the Arab world is going to pay for it might be a little bit better than us having to pay for it. But another major issue in this point is who's doing the rebuilding. The problem is after every single conflict that Hamas has started, Hamas gets money to rebuild and then rebuilds terror tunnels and headquarters underneath hospitals. So we need to make sure that if this money is going to the Gaza area, that not a single person who's involved in this planning is pro-Hamas. Otherwise, we're just going to have more building of terror infrastructure. That might be a little bit of a challenge to do. So in this point, we have yet another wishful thinking, but how are we going to ensure this isn't going to happen? It's happened literally every single time prior. The third point is that once this is agreed to by Hamas and Israel, both sides will stop the war immediately. The IDF will halt all operations and gradually withdraw from the entire Gaza Strip. And point number 4, within 48 hours of Israel publicly accepting the deal, every living and dead hostage will be returned. Now, these two things are great, and technically all Israel's ever wanted is having everybody back. The one small issue with this is the fact that Hamas has never played ball thus far when it comes to giving back the hostages. There's always excuses. We lost this person. We couldn't find that person. So when the IDF pulls back, what happens when they start playing games and we lost this body or we can't find that body? Who's going to deal with this? This is one of the major issues in this entire plan. Who is in charge of making sure that Hamas lives up to their end of the bargain? In every deal prior, Israel fulfills their requirements and Hamas plays games. If there's no mechanism to ensure that these things happen, because let's be honest, they're a terror group, what do? Point number 5 in the deal, which is obviously par for the course, every single deal needs this, it can't be done without it apparently, is that once the hostages are returned, Israel will of course free several hundred Palestinian security prisoners, people with life sentences, in addition to over 1,000 Gazans who had been arrested since the start of the war. Here we have yet another issue, which is we are going to give back prisoners who have killed Jewish people in the past and have life sentences, much like Sinwar, put them back into Gaza, and then hope Gaza will be peaceful after that? If anyone remembers, Sinwar was in jail for committing these kind of crimes, and then let out and put back into Gaza, and look what happened. So the idea that we even have to release life sentence prisoners who have killed people is pretty bad, but then you're going to put them back into Gaza, even worse, and then expect it to be peaceful after that. I'm sure once they get home, they'll stop plotting to kill all Israelis and all Jews, much like Sinwar did, right? And unlike in the past where it was a temporary ceasefire where we released these people, this is supposedly going to be a permanent ceasefire in order to create a Gazan Palestinian Arab state after we put these people back into it, with Israel having no way of taking out these life sentence killers, just letting them continue to live their lives plotting the next October 7th. But I guess when it comes to dealing with Israel and Jews, this is kind of par for the course. We always have to give up the people who kill us. We always have to let them go and let them do it again next time, because any thought that we wouldn't do that is the end of a deal instantly. And this brings us to point number 6. And to be honest, I'll try not to laugh when I read this one. Once the hostages are returned, Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence will be granted amnesty for everything they've done. while members who wish to leave the Strip will be granted safe passage to a receiving country. So 2 issues with this point. Number 1, we assume that the people are going to be honest. Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm good. I'm done with this whole intifada thing. I'm going to stay here and totally not try and kill Jews ever again. We're going to believe that. Really. Not to mention the fact that we're going to give them amnesty. So of course we can never hold them accountable for the massacres they have done, the people they have killed, the people on their own side that they've killed over the last couple of months for supposedly collaborating or stealing aid. Not to mention that if any of these Hamas members actually do want to be granted safe passage, where are they going to go? No Arab countries want them as of now. Turkey might take them. Qatar might take them. And we're going to let them live in exile where they can plan and coordinate things from afar? I guess we really don't have much of a choice here when it comes to point number 6. We want our people back. We want this to be over. And letting them leave is probably the safest and quickest way. But let's be honest. If they're in Gaza or outside of Gaza, they're very likely not going to give up their hatred towards Jews, and they're just going to do it either from afar or in a different way. I hate to point out a very obvious fact here, which is the fact that in Iran, we had the Ayatollah flee for his own safety because he was against the Shah of Iran, living in exile until the time when he came back during his revolution. So if we send all of these Hamas members, especially their leadership, to other countries, how long until they retake Gaza through force and then just fly back in, just like the Ayatollah? If you leave them alive and allow them to live around the world, doesn't mean they're not going to try and come back. Point number 7 is probably obvious, which is that once the deal is reached, aid is going to go into Gaza. It's a little bit silly considering when you see the videos right now that the iPhone 17 is currently available for sale in Gaza. So much for a genocide, I guess, when you can get the latest tech. Considering that's not even available yet apparently in Israel. It's not like they're really actually starving. I mean, there might be some pockets here and there of people who don't have access to food. But we've all seen the restaurants that are open. We've seen the markets filled with food. And we've even seen people at the aid station pouring out flour because they want to use the flour bag to carry off all of the other more important things. There is definitely not a lack of food in Gaza. But nonetheless, I understand why that's there, in addition to adding infrastructure equipment going in to help remove the rubble, which is great, for sure, they need to rebuild. But is that infrastructure going to be used underground for the next tunnels? Or is it going to be used to actually create a much better place without terror tunnels underneath? I guess time will tell. Nothing in this deal would suggest that anyone's even looking at this. How would we even know? Number 8, aid will be distributed without interference from either side by the United Nations and the Red Crescent. This is actually pretty funny because the United Nations isn't handing out anything at this point, but I'm sure they'll do it once the deal is done. What this section is really meant to do is ensure that the GHF, which has successfully been handing out hundreds of millions of packages of aid, is no longer going to be working. We don't want them involved. We need the United Nations, who is a corrupt organization who steals all the aid and gives it to Hamas. We need them to be in charge. So this actually gives up the ability for Israel and even the United States to even track what goes in. We're reliant yet again on the United Nations, who's proven themselves to essentially be a bunch of liars and working with Hamas. We've talked about that on the podcast before. Interestingly, I did see in one article they suggested that the purposefully vague section here could technically leave room for the GHF to continue doing their work because it is listed as an American aid organization and not an Israeli one. Therefore, it's not part of either side of the conflict, and they could still possibly find a way to stay in business. Point number 9 is quite interesting, because Gaza will be administered by a temporary transitional government of Palestinian technocrats who will be responsible for providing the day-to-day services for the people in Gaza. The committee will be supervised by a new international body established by the UN in consultation with the Arab and the European world, and it will establish a framework for funding this redevelopment of Gaza until the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform. So this one is a little bit of a tricky one, because for one, you now have Palestinian Arabs in charge of Gaza, so you're going to assume that none of them are aligned with Hamas or will take over power themselves. And this is going to be chosen by the US, the Arab world, and European partners, which, I'll be honest, I'm not too keen on. Because maybe the US has their best interests, but the Arab world might not. They might put people who are aligned with them in charge. somehow making sure that their interests are looked after. I hate to say our European partners unfortunately have shown themselves to be pro-Hamas. So we have these European partners helping choose this committee that's going to oversee Gaza. Are they not purposely going to put Hamas people in charge? How do we trust them at all considering the way they've been acting? And the last most important thing, which might be a deal breaker, is they're going to put the Palestinian Authority in charge of Gaza, something that Israel has refused in the past because of their corruption. But they have this little caveat here. The Palestinian Authority has completed its reform, meaning actually having elections maybe, not having a corrupt dictator in charge who his own people hate him. We've talked about this on the podcast before. Nobody in Gaza or the West Bank likes the PA, but we're going to force that onto the people of Gaza? How long until the next anti-Palestinian Authority group starts? Give it months or years? Someone's going to want to overthrow them because of their lack of work and governance. Why are we putting in charge a group that everybody hates? This, I hate to say, might be a deal breaker. Or maybe a small gift to Hamas, who in 5 or 10 years from now, when people hate the PA, will be calling them back to power. Point number 10 is creating an economic plan which will be created to build Gaza into modern Middle Eastern cities. Sure, sounds great, but I hate to say, who knows who's going to be in charge of that and how many hospitals and buildings are going to have tunnels underneath them. Point 11 essentially is just improving the economic situation in Gaza through tariffs and access to different rates to create businesses. Hopefully this doesn't open up Gaza Strip for terrorism money to flow in through fake businesses. Number 12, that no one will be forced to leave Gaza, but those who choose to leave will be allowed to return. Gazans will be encouraged to remain in the Strip and offered opportunities to build a better future. This one seems pretty reasonable. Hate to say, we've been saying this for about 2 years now, to let people leave to somewhere better and then come back. So it'll be interesting how the Palestinian Arabs, or Hamas specifically, deals with this issue. They don't want people to leave. They want their human shields. And I really, really hate to point this out. No Arab countries want them. We see that currently. Not a single Arab country is even taking them. So where are they going to go? Obviously, to the West. And I hate to say, the West right now is pretty anti-immigrant around the world. It's a lot of people who are not so pleased with the immigration policies of their governments. And you're expecting all of these now Gazans who are former Hamas members to go traipsing around the world looking for citizenship? I'll be honest, it seems like a plan that's going to fail. It seems a little dangerous and scary. It kind of would be nice if they actually went to the Arab world and said, hey, Arab world, you take these people. The West isn't going to take these people. These are your brothers and sisters and cousins. You take them. Saudi Arabia is a very big country. Take them. Egypt, take them. Jordan, you're the Palestinian Arab state. Take them. It should be forced on the Arab countries. But of course, that's not going to be done. It's the Western world's problem. Point number 13. Hamas has no role in Gaza's governance whatsoever. There will be a commitment to destroy and stop building any offensive military infrastructure, including tunnels, and Gaza's new leaders will commit to peaceful coexistence with their neighbors. That sounds great. How do we stop that? I'm pretty sure for the last 20 years, we've been hoping for this exact thing. Stop building military infrastructure and focus on your own people and your own country. So the difference here is that we're hoping that Hamas will agree to not be in power. The problem with that is, A, how do we ensure that these Gazans are not Hamas aligned, or whatever Hamas 2.0 is? How do you ensure to keep these people out of government? And number 2 is how do we stop them from coming back into government, as we said earlier? Once they officially take over control, a few Hamas-aligned people, and then they bring their leadership back from overseas, just like the Ayatollah. These are very wishful thinking ideas, and it would be great because we've been hoping for this for a very long time. But we always forget we're dealing with actual terrorists, not necessarily even Hamas. Many of the people who just support Hamas are pro-terrorism and from the river to the sea. So these are the people we're hoping are going to just change their tune all of a sudden. It's a little bit of a dangerous thought. Point number 14 is very interesting because this is the security guarantee provided by the regional partners, also known as the Arab countries, that Hamas and other Gaza factions will comply with the obligations that this ceasefire creates. Therefore, not being in power, giving up power, leaving, whatever it is, not creating infrastructure for their terror. But how do we really trust the Arab world to be on top of this? And if they are we going to see them in the Gaza Strip with their own soldiers, killing Hamas members? As much as the Arab world really doesn't like Palestinian Arabs, I find it hard to believe that they're really going to put as much pressure as Israel would if we were governing that place. How many of these Arab countries, they're going to be like, it's not worth the fight to try and stop them from making tunnels. Who cares? It's not really worth killing a few people or bombing a building that's now being used as a terror infrastructure. They're probably not going to do it. So how do we rely on them to actually maintain this kind of peace? Is it just a matter of time? We'll do a couple of years while they rebuild. The Arab world will kind of let this stuff settle underneath the surface. We won't really know about it. Or even if we do know about it, the world's just going to sit back and say, look, Israel, you agreed. Leave them alone. Don't bother them. Until in about 10 years, Hamas has an infrastructure. They officially take over. The Arab world leaves because they can't fight the problems, much like the PA can't. And then war begins, just like the last time. The problem with this plan is the fact that we are relying on other people to protect us. People who obviously don't care as much as we do, and might just allow this issue to fester under the surface and then eventually run away and leave us cleaning up the mess that they created. If you think about even the United States, it depends on which group is in charge, Democrats or Republicans, when this all hits the fan. And will we be on our own again? Part of this current conflict is saying we will never again rely on other countries to keep us safe. And here we are trying to possibly make a deal where we're going to do exactly that. Point number 15 is on the same lines, which is that the international partners are going to develop a Palestinian police force. I hate to make a point about this. The Palestinian police force in Palestinian Authority territory has been proven to be corrupt. Not that long ago, a Palestinian Authority policeman, I believe it might have been 2 of them, actually killed an Israeli. So these people are not exactly the most trustworthy people. Just because we train them to be police doesn't mean they can't be on the side of terrorism and on the side of Hamas. So great that you're going to create a Palestinian police force, but like all Arab countries, will it not be corrupt? What assurances are Israel given in order to ensure that this doesn't happen just like it happened in the PA? Point number 16 is that Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza, and the IDF will obviously hand over territory it currently occupies in order to create peace. The problem with this is that Israel technically has already planned on taking a buffer zone, more area between Israel and Gaza to ensure the safety. Clearly, the previous buffer zone was not good enough. So this point, I'm assuming, suggests that Israel has to give up that buffer zone and just rely solely on the fact that we're hoping that any of these earlier points work, which is a very scary thought. We've done this before. If you recall, in Syria and Lebanon, we had demilitarized zones patrolled by other people. In that case, it was the UN. And in that case, we saw the UN literally allow terrorism to take place in the demilitarized zone. So again, we're going to have no demilitarized zone or a lesser one, and it's going to be patrolled by an international stabilization force. Let's see how that works out. So far, it hasn't worked at all when it was the UN. Point number 17 is kind of interesting. If Hamas delays or rejects this proposal, the above points, all of the things I just told you, will proceed anyways in the terror-free areas, which the IDF will gradually hand over to the International Stabilization Force. This is kind of interesting because this implies that there could be a partial situation where Hamas stays in power and rejects, but Israel still hands over the land to an international force. I don't quite understand this one, only because it seems like Israel's relinquishing their power with the other side not even agreeing. So yes, it will be nice that the international world is going to take over the issues in Gaza and Israeli soldiers don't have to. But on the other hand, Israel, unfortunately, is seceding all of the work that they've done. And what if they need to actually go and fully take over Gaza in order to maintain what the international world can't? It seems like a really silly thing to say, Israel, even if the other group doesn't do it, you still do it. Seems like a recipe for failure. Maybe this section should have included something that Hamas needs to do if they don't hold up their end of the bargain, or some type of punishment. Otherwise, what's the incentive for them to do anything? It seems like Israel is the only one willing and able to give up anything, and Hamas gets to do whatever it wants. Point number 18 is kind of funny. Israel agrees not to carry out any future strikes in Qatar. This is funny because clearly that strike in Qatar scared the crap out of Hamas. So Hamas needs some assurances that they can stay living happy and healthy. Even if Israel decides that they are going to leave Gaza, if all of their head members go to Doha Israel can take them out pretty quickly. It only shows how scared they really are. Number 19 is, I think, the most crucial. A process will be established to de-radicalize the population of Gaza, and this will include an interfaith dialogue aimed at changing mindsets and narratives in Israel and Gaza. I find it very ironic that they left Israel in there too, as if Israel has the problem with Islamic terrorism or Jewish terrorism in order to kill. Meanwhile, in Israel proper, Arabs live happily. There's 2 million of them and no one bothers them. They have equal rights. Some of them do try and kill us, but it's us that's the problem for sure. We need some re-education. But it is something that is very important. We mentioned earlier in this podcast episode. We need the de-radicalization of Gaza. Otherwise, what's the point of all of this? If over 70% of the people in Gaza still support Hamas, when Hamas is supposedly gone, it's not going to change the way that they feel. You need to de-radicalize, just like we did in World War II, to get rid of the Nazis. And the question remains, and it's not explained in this point, who's going to do it? Who sets the curriculum? If you think it's the United Nations, that's who's causing the problem right now. Are they going to be kicked out and a new set of education is going to be put in? Because if not, why are we relying on them to teach the people anything? There is some hope, however, because there are countries like Saudi and UAE who have found a way to implement this radical change to their education system. They've removed the anti-Semitism that once plagued all of their countries since 1948. So it would be interesting to see if they do it and we kick the UN out. Because if the UN is at all involved, we've seen what's happened with UNRWA and how they've been a major part of this problem. Point number 20, when Gaza's redevelopment has been advanced and the PA reform has completed, the conditions may be in place for a credible pathway to statehood, which has recognized the aspiration of the Palestinian people. This point, I think, might cause a little bit of a problem. Again, Israel has said from the start that the PA will not control Gaza because it has so many problems of its own. If you think about the West Bank or Judea and Samaria right now, it's not exactly a safe place for Jews. And this is what we're going to model, Gaza. Why can't we ask for better? Somewhere like UAE, where Jews can now travel freely. Why are we putting the Palestinian Authority in charge who can't even really control the area they have? And then grant them statehood? The problem with statehood is they've never wanted a state in the past. It's from the river to the sea. So this point, that they apparently are going to somehow get statehood, is sort of wishful thinking, because they've never accepted a state ever before. There's no actual borders that they'll accept. So what the heck's the point? This might just be placating at the idea that they're going to get a state just to shut them up. But the reality is they'll probably never get one because they don't really want one. The last point, point number 21, is the U.S. will establish a dialogue between Israel and the Palestinians to agree on a political horizon for a peaceful future. The Palestinian Arabs, for the most part, at least their leadership, don't really want peaceful coexistence. They want the entire land from the river to the sea. Could you even imagine an Arab leader right now in Palestinian territories saying, you know what, from the river to the sea is over, we're good with what we have now, let's make peace? It's never going to happen. That's literally their entire identity, is from the river to the sea. In the end, what do I think of this plan that Trump is putting forward? It's better than nothing, I guess. Right now we have really nothing going on the table. The Arab world gave up trying to make a peace deal ages ago. The Americans, for the most part, have done nothing for peace except for throw the Obama plan, the Biden plan, the Trump plan, none of which actually took place. Maybe this one is the most concrete we've had to date. And the other option would be occupation, for lack of a better word. For Israel to go into that area, put our soldiers at risk by having them in an area filled with hostile people, and try and maintain control. Which, if I remind any of my listeners who've been around for a long time, that's the reason why Ariel Sharon in 2005 pulled us out of Gaza, because there were a lot of Israeli soldiers being forced to protect small Jewish communities. People were at risk. And so he decided it was best to just not put our soldiers at risk. I'm not suggesting I agree or disagree with the disengagement. Clearly it hasn't gone so well. Maybe it needs to be rolled out in a very different way. Maybe, I hate to say, we need to stop trusting that the Palestinian Arabs will ever do anything for peace. You can give them land, they'll attack you. You can offer them a state, they'll reject it, and they'll attack you. It really doesn't matter what happens. All of these deals are essentially just falling to the wayside because the people we're making a deal with can't ever accept them, or won't ever accept them. Do I think that Israel should take this deal? Honestly, it's not my place to say. I'm not Israeli, and I'm also not a politician. That's for Israelis to decide. From my personal, historical, and educated opinion, I think this deal falls very short. It's filled with a lot of wishful thinking, a lot of hope that other people who have not proven themselves to be valid partners in peace to do a lot of things that they've never done before. As was very poignantly pointed out by many people, the Germans didn't give up because they had a peace deal. They didn't negotiate the end of the war. They surrendered because they were finished and they gave up, and they realized that their ideology and their demands and their hopes and aspirations were all bad and wrong. And they had to realize that they would give up to the superior ideology and the superior might. And that's why we had the de-radicalization. People no longer believed in Nazism. Clearly it failed them. So unless we allow the people of Gaza to recognize that this deal isn't going to happen, and that Hamas will be wiped out, and that their ideology failed, their techniques failed, and that it will lead to nothing but death and destruction, maybe that's what they need in order to change their ways. And maybe this is the last chance for Gaza to make that decision. Do they go down with the ship with Hamas? Or do they maybe make a deal in order to actually change their lives forever? It seems like only time will tell. This has been another episode of the Jewish Diaspora Report. Don't forget to check us out on social media at jdr.podcast and check out some of our other episodes on your favorite podcast source. We'll see you next time.